entirely. I want to first of all welcome the Minister to the House for this piece of legislation, which, to be quite frank, Minister, I don't think should be before us at all. And I think that you personally have a bit of a neck to present this bill as anything other than a threatening piece of legislation which is put in place to divide and conquer between trade unions and to threaten public sector workers in relation to the deal which involves cuts to hard-fought gains which have been made by staff in the public sector over many, many years. And that's essentially how the vast majority of public sector workers see this piece of legislation, as a threatening piece of legislation, strong-arm tactics being used by you and your government to force through pay cuts, but also changes to the entitlements of people who work in the public sector generally, not just those at the top, but also those on low and middle incomes in the public sector. We don't support at all this notion, Minister, that taking €1 billion out of the public sector, when you consider what they have given already during the course of the last 5 years, is good for the people who work in the public sector itself, is good for public services and the provision of public services, or good for the domestic economy. In fact, it's bad for all three, because public sector workers, and you know this in your heart, have taken very significant pay cuts over the last number of years. When you were sitting on this side of the other House in opposition, you railroaded against the policies of Fianna Fáil at the time. But now you come in and you implement those very same policies. And I look back on the Labour Party in opposition, and I remember a very different Taoiseach and Eamon Gilmore, who used to take to his feet and rail against what was happening in relation to the banks and what Fianna Fáil were doing at the time in relation to working people, both in the public and the private sector. Those very same workers, those very same individuals see nothing different from what they were doing and what you were doing. The reality is, Minister, that you are simply implementing Troika policies and Fianna Fáil policies that were agreed as part of the National Development Plan. It must be a real source of embarrassment. And you see, you come in here, Minister, and you don't even look and engage with people who speak. You look down at your notes and you look elsewhere. You can't even look people. You can't even look people in the eye. You can't even look people in the eye, because there's an arrogance about this government, and there's an arrogance about you as a minister, that you can't even listen to what people have to say. You don't even have the ability. A bit like the Minister for Justice. You don't have the ability to listen. You don't have the ability to listen. So I'll take it.
On a point of order, enough of the personal attacks. I mean,
the sound bites are good.
This is just soundbite stuff. Let's talk about the substance of this bill.
That's fine.
The Labour Party, when they were in opposition, would know all about soundbites, and they were very good about soundbites when they were in opposition. But it must be a source of embarrassment for you personally, Minister, and for the Labour Party.
For your lack of economic policy.
Well, it was interesting that again I sat here for 20 minutes and Senator Gilroy criticised my party. Not one single interruption from me. It strikes me that people in the government are simply not able to listen to truth. And there's a lot of truth in what I'm saying, and that's why it hurts them. And if I can continue with my contribution uninterrupted, and if people want to come back and respond, and I'm sure the Minister will, he would have an opportunity to do so. It must be a source of embarrassment for you and for some trade unions in this country that they are in some way affiliated to you, given what you are doing with this bill and the erosion of workers' rights which we are seeing. Do you not realise that those rights were hard fought and hard won? The working week, that trade unions had to fight for those rights in every step of the way against previous governments. Increments, pay itself, and also overtime rates are all hard fought gains made by working people, all being set aside by you and your government. The public sector at the moment is creaking. We know what's happening in our hospitals. Morale is low in frontline and nurses, doctors, the same with teachers, the same in local authorities. On average, the ordinary working person in the public sector has taken a pay cut of about 14%. 14%. And it's simply unsustainable that you would keep coming back over and over again and taking from their pockets. Now, we'll get to the substance and I'll get to the alternatives so that maybe the senators across might actually learn something. Because Senator Clune talked about getting our house in order, and then she talked about the tax wedge and foreign direct investment and all of that. And it's always the same argument. Let's not talk about taxes when it comes to foreign direct investment. Let's not talk about taxes when it comes to higher earners. Let's not deal with any of that. But we have no difficulty coming in with a piece of legislation which empties the pockets of low and middle income workers in this state. No difficulty whatsoever. If you want to look at, she quoted some report which talked about the growing economy. Look at the ESRI's report, the last two reports in relation to the last two budgets, the most unfair and the most unequal. You see, this is what you could have done, Minister. If you substantially cut the pay of people at the top, you will hear no complaint from Sinn Féin. We will support it. Substantially cut the pay of people over €100,000, over €100,000 a year. You could, for example, deal with real waste in the system. You could deal with real €100,000, Minister. €100,000. You know exactly what our proposal is. €100,000. Cap public sector pay at €100,000. You could also, Minister, you could, and I know that would affect you in your pocket, but we'll leave that to one side. You could also deal with real waste in the system. We know we're spending far too much on branded drugs. We can achieve much more savings there. You and your government, when they were in opposition, talked about eliminating waste in the system. You haven't done so. And in relation to taxation, a third rate of tax at 48%, an income over 100,000, a wealth tax, standardise all tax reliefs. There's any amount of options. But I'll finish on this. You see, the problem, Minister, is you're not prepared to listen. You're not prepared to listen because, again, there is an arrogance about this government and there is a contempt for ordinary working people, and they know it. And you know it, and I think that you will feel that come the next general election, you will get exactly what you've sown from the people that you've betrayed and your party have let down. Your party have let down because of what you have done since you've come into government.